It's the biggest branding mistake that I see people make, getting so tied to how they want to be perceived and the people they want to be purchasing their products. I used to have a really mean gymnastics coach. She would say to this girl, she'd be like, "Don't stand next to those girls, they don't like you." I feel like I remember her voice in my head sometimes with advertising. It's like, stop trying to appeal to these people. They don't want it. You've probably spent a ton of money and you've seen insanely high CPMs advertising to these people who just don't want your product. The brands that you see flourish are the ones who are like, you want this? Great. Let me start speaking to you directly, addressing the pain points that matter to you, and making content that you're going to find fun and engaging.
How did Spotlight Oral Care get 6 million views and over $30,000 in earned media value on TikTok? How did Plant People drive a 50% decrease in cost per ad to cart and over a 30% increase in ROAS? To go big like these brands, you gotta think small and work with mini social micro-influencers to create authentic UGC for your brand. Tired of hunting down and DMing creators on social, negotiating back and forth, only to have their one-off post flop and not impact your sales? Leave it to Mini Social to handle all the nitty-gritty of booking the right creators for your brand, delivering top-quality content you can use across your ads and organic social media. Ready to try them out for yourself? Get 15% off your first project when you start in Q2. To claim your D2C listener discount, just go to dtc.minisocial.com. It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric, and I am here with Avery, our content lead over at the socials division. Avery, your last podcast with us was one of our most popular ones of the last few months, where we talked about 3 to 5 second ads, how they're kind of taken over. Just checking in on that content. Is that strategy still one that's paying dividends?
Yeah, totally still working across the board, across different verticals, across different demographics. Yeah, it's just really found its place, I feel like, on Meta and on socials in general. Like, obviously, that's what drives TikTok, and that's how people consume content now. People are probably watching a clip of this. Like Instagram, like you don't have like, I don't know, it takes a lot for me to sit down for like 20 minutes and watch something. So obviously those like 5 to 10 second clips where I can get excited about a product are definitely still working.
Very cool. You spoke a little bit about audiences there, and that's what we're going to talk about today. When I was reading your write-up for this podcast, it made me think of the Donald Rumsfeld quote, which is, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want or the one you might have in the future. I don't normally like to quote the military-industrial complex on the podcast, but I thought that fit well with your sort of bent on what you're talking about really how to drill in on who your audience really is, not who you might want them to be.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I think when you work agency side like I do, you see a lot of delusion come through the door. And the biggest thing that I see, the biggest miss and mistake is this delusion around like, who wants my product? Why do they want it? And then building an entire identity and brand around that and it being false is a huge waste of money on the branding side, but it also then you're spending into audiences that don't like you. I used to have a really mean Russian gymnastics coach, and she would say to this girl, she loved her, but she would say to this girl, she'd be like, "Don't stand next to those girls, they don't like you." And it was so cut and dry, but I feel like I like remember her voice in my head sometimes with advertising. It's like, stop trying to appeal to these people. They don't like you. They don't want this product. Like, move along. It's kind of the main point.
Super interesting. Can you give me like an example, broadly of someone who kind of came in with an idea of who their audience was, and through testing and creative, we determined it was someone else?
Yeah, totally. I think one that's not like, there was no delusion involved. It was sort of like an apparel type of situation. And they very rightly thought that they would have a much younger audience. But after I came on board and started noticing some trends, it skewed quite a bit. Not old, but it skewed in more the sort of elder millennial direction. And then it has kind of had this ripple effect where we've completely pivoted. Like, they did exactly what you should do as a client, which is listen to those signals. And it was like, okay, they're already resonating with our ads. Like, we're already selling them this product. So if we start actually speaking directly to them, and it's even come down to like, something that we noticed was because it was an older demographic, it's like those people are typically a bit busier than someone in their early 20s. So we started doing all these like bundling and things that kind of evoke this idea of like, we're making this simple for you. We're making, being fashionable, putting together an outfit, we're making it easier for you. And that started going like gangbusters. And then we're able to take that information, distill it to like, okay, well, we should bundle more. We should stop trying to sell like unique single SKUs and instead just give something to like a Utah mom that she can put on a Friday night and have a good time. So yeah, it wasn't like they didn't have a really bad case of delusion there, but they just like very rightly thought that their audience would be one thing and then it was something different.
I bet that on average, that's the way it tends to go the most, just because older audiences tend to have more money. And as a elder millennial aging hipster, I can tell you that, the people are feeling younger longer and living younger longer, like when it comes to their style, when it comes to their, all those things. So I could see that. I'm sure it goes the other way as well, but I bet quite often it's going that way, just because those are the people. Also, if you're advertising on Meta, their Meta probably skews older. There's probably more older people there to begin with, especially on Facebook. Have you ever had it go the other way? Have you ever found out that, oh wow, this is actually a younger millennial brand or a Gen Z brand, but we thought it was a older one?
Yeah, I have seen like with kind of a home goods brand that it was just like we knew that there were some younger millennials, but I always assumed that they would be women, and we started seeing some of our ads really do well with like younger millennial men. And it made sense. We'd kind of like opened up the catalog, started selling some different stuff, and I started like, and I still do this, like just slapping the most like egregious TikTok audios on there, like making memes and stuff. And it's like they're looking at this stuff organically. So odds are they're gonna like interact with the ads. But yeah, it was really interesting. In that case, I just noticed a couple of like product specific ads were starting to show that they were trending towards this younger millennial male demographic. I literally remember getting up from my desk, going to see my partner, and I was like, when you like like what is on your Instagram feed right now? What are you looking at? What do you see on like Reels, for example? And did like a full creep of his phone and was like, what AI voice are you guys like interacting with? What kind of like editing style can I emulate? Just
Right
kind of
now, it's just
stealing.
a lot of this. A lot of mewing, a lot of mogging going on. My daughter constantly is just going to me and doing that. I'm just trying. She's looks maxing at 10, which I think could be a problem, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So walk us through, if you're a brand, there's lots of brands listening out there. What steps do you take to, what do you advise that brands take to kind of look in the cold, hard light of reality at their real audience?
Totally. So if you're someone who's like unfamiliar with kind of like branding, demographic work, it feels really daunting, but it's actually really easy. And it basically just combines like actual data points with, well, I kind of call it like vibes, but it's really just research. So researching the vibe, I guess, is the way to put it. But kind of the first rule are like, facts are facts. The numbers that you're seeing don't lie. So really trust your data. Go into GA4, Shopify. Post purchase surveys are also great too, because you can start to understand like, is my product being purchased like as a gift for a significant amount of time? Like that can skew things. Like maybe you're seeing a ton of women age 45 plus buying something, but they're gifting it to their teenage son. So really getting like a good grasp and understanding on like the data and who's purchasing, and then also looking going into Meta and just looking at like who is converting on ads, and does that match up with your larger ecosystem data? Because sometimes you'll see, like I've seen clients come in where it's like they've got other programs running outside of paid socials, so the like traffic that we're bringing in could be vastly different from the typical like organic just word of mouth people, and that's always a bit of a red flag. So make sure you go into Meta and like do some detective work. I often look like any ad that starts to perform well, like I really keep an eye on who's interacting with it and where they're interacting with it. Is it Meta, is it Instagram? All of that's super valuable. And then once you have a really firm grasp on the actual numbers and data, that's when it gets a little like You, the Netflix series You, where you just start really like stalking these people. And this is my favorite part where you get to kind of like, yeah, just start creeping, going on to like, yeah, where they are. So figuring out, is that Meta? Is it Instagram? Is it TikTok? Are they big YouTube people? Typically, I like to try to find some like big creators, content creators, and influencers in that demographic. And then I'll like create just people based on their following. Like I'll find someone who looks like the person who likes to buy a product that I sell on the internet, and then I'll just go down a rabbit hole of being like, what kind of verbiage do they use? What emojis do they use? What are they like posting about? What matters to them? Because all that kind of can bleed into like, what are their pain points? What do you do for your ad copy? So it's all super valuable. But yeah, really understanding like that organic content that they absorb is really helpful. And then also I start to look at different platforms. So not like traditionally big advertisers. So things like Reddit, Pinterest, places where they will just kind of go to be amongst like minded people in their hobbies. I've spent a lot of long nights on Reddit looking at people talking about like products that I sell and really getting acquainted with like anything that they do on the platform.
It makes sense to go, yeah, especially go with the platforms where they're expressing themselves. I'm trying to remember this example. It was a good post recently, but it was just about like the real value of niching down, literally understanding how they use the product, what they say about these kind of products, how these products fit into their lives, and then have that inform actually how you create the ads. Can you give any examples of a product where we've sort of done that, and that maybe the language or the imagery or how we've actually integrated what we've learned from one of these platforms into the actual ad that worked?
Yeah, I used to work with like a specialty coffee gear brand, and I am not someone who's overly I love coffee. I drink a lot of coffee, but these were people who really cared about coffee, and they cared about, how you would grind it and like the particle size of the grounds, like things I'd never heard about. And there's kind of an assumption that a lot of purchases were very aesthetic based because that's what we usually would see win. And then those were actually like the days where I was on Reddit in a really heavy way because people talked about our products a lot. And I started noticing like a ton of pain points that I'd never considered because, again, I don't know about most of the stuff. So I started incorporating those pain points into ads, into like UGC, into pages, and I started just addressing them right away. And we definitely saw a performance uptick through doing that and having that like very deep understanding of someone who, because they were also, it was a high AOV product. So they were doing their research. They would have been looking at the same Reddit threads that I was. So I just put two and two together and it's like, they're going to come here, see these complaints. But on my landing page experience, I'm going to go, here are 3 reasons why this will like be perfect for espresso or whatever it was that people would complain about, and kind of like circumvent those opposing points.
I've seen this happen with brands where and I'll use Keen as an example because Sean McGinnis has been on the podcast more than once, and he's actually not with the company anymore. But he was explaining a process where he really helped them like blow up by getting very specific about the pain points that their shoes solved. And really, I think he raised the font on their website by 2 points because they realized that everyone on the site was a little bit older. So us older folks with our bad eyes like to see bigger accessibility fonts. But then he was talking about the bit of the struggles they were having because the CEO believed like the big future of the brand was to be less direct response, problem reaction, and more sort of like try to get them back into that stylish market. And I don't know how that has gone, and I don't know whether they have kind of followed through with that or not. But I bet that's a bit of an eternal struggle of brands who have this idea of who they want their customer to be, and trying to shift it away from what's working into what they aspire. And I bet that's a tricky process.
Yeah, it's the biggest kind of branding mistake that I see people make, is just getting so tied to how they want to be perceived and the people they want to be purchasing their products. Where, yeah, thinking back to my old gymnastics coach, is like, they don't like you. They don't want it. You've probably spent a ton of money and you've seen like insanely high CPMs advertising to these people who just don't want your product. And I think it's a harsh reality to face for some brands who really like tie themselves into being a certain thing. But yeah, the brands that you see flourish are the ones who are like, you want this? Great. Let me start speaking to you directly, addressing the pain points that matter to you, and making content that you're going to find fun and engaging.
I think that's the way to get through to any delusional brands out there would be like, what is this costing you? What, like because if you're lumping it all together in broader campaigns, it's affecting all of your performance. It's affecting your performance in the algorithm's eyes if you keep trying to reach an audience that isn't interested in it. And by breaking that apart, even, you'd probably have a campaign that could really take off if you were more targeting that audience. And that leads me to my next question is like, for a long time, and I know you're more on the creative side. I know you're tied in with buying as well. But for a long time, we've been advocating a lot more broad targeting, using the creative to kind of pull out the audience that you want. But when you do find that your audience is performing better with one segment or another, how granular are we getting with the actual audience targeting when we do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely, like, I think I'm still also an advocate for going broad, especially on socials, until you do some of the really like deep work of figuring out like not only like a bucket of like, okay, young millennial men like this product, until you do the work of like going deeper and you can answer the question of like young millennial men who like PS5 and Pete Davidson, like they're our number one fans. They're ride or dies for this like particular product. Until you can really like safely say that, it's kind of not, I think, the most important thing. It's kind of second to creative, like actually, because typically with Meta, it's like those ads that you make kind of gently or very in your face appealing to those people will find those people because they'll just start to get picked up by the algorithm. But after a while, like once you kind of go really deep and have a good understanding, I think that's when like really specific audiences can start to make a lot of sense.
Tomorrow in the newsletter, we're putting out a piece about a bunch of brands that have jumped on the Beyonce Cowboy Carter trend. Levi's changed their name to apparently one of her song titles where it's Levi's with two eyes. And there's a bunch of these big brands that are making these in jokes to really try to capitalize on the popularity of this album. And that when you really know your audience well, those are the kind of swings you can take. Like Levi's has an incredibly broad audience, but they probably know that the people who buy the most of their products maybe have a great affinity with Beyonce and country, for instance, that convergence. So therefore they're able to make that bigger swing on the creative side. So I assume, yeah, I like this kind of knowledge probably unlocks a lot for you in paid ads, in your organic, in your, how you handle your memes, all that kind of stuff.
Totally, yeah. It just allows you to have that like confidence when you're approaching something like that, like a big swing. You're not just like it adds like authenticity to the brand because, some brands if they start talking about Cowboy Carter, which is a great album.
Is
So
it? Okay, I haven't.
no, but if you do that, it doesn't fit with your demographic. It just feels so false, and you know that it's
Yeah.
just like a little social media manager sitting there, like, oh my god, everyone's doing Cowboy Carter, so I have to do Cowboy Carter. But if you actually like know that it'll resonate and you feel good about that, you can make content that's like a bit cheekier too.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you
Weirder, as
like
Avery might say.
yeah, you
As you
can get weird with it. Yeah, spend a lot of time like with that demographic, seeing how they think and like what they like. Then it like brings some authenticity. Even though I'm not a young millennial man, it's like I've spent enough time now deep diving on that persona to like really understand what they might think is funny.
I'm more into the Kendrick, J. Cole, Drake beef right now. So if you're trying to
Oh,
appeal to wannabe younger millennials, aging hipsters, probably try to build K dot into your pitch, because I think there's something there for me.
nice. The all caps bum.
It's
I
just
would
big meat.
simply retire. Yeah, surely retire from music.
We need Lil Wayne to chime in on that as well. Obviously, Kanye already did. Okay, well that's good. Anything else on this topic? And if not, what are you enjoying on your social apps these days? What are the memes that you think are fun these days?
Ooh, yeah, good question. Yeah, I think this topic, like, I could talk about it way more, or we could comfortably wrap it up here. It's like this is probably as like in depth as your gonna get. And I guess that like final words is if you've never done this type of work, you're a new brand, like it's really important. Start doing it now. And if you're a bigger brand and your costs are high on platform, this is probably why. So maybe it's very soul crushing, but start to rework and rethink your brand. And things that I'm loving, I'm still stuck in the like, I don't know, you saw the sad hamster on TikTok.
Oh
I see a
yeah.
lot of sad hamsters. Love the sad hamster. I've started like kind of making the noise and playing pretend violin. Like, I don't know, partner doesn't want to get dessert or something. I'll sing the
Are you
song.
doing that one where you're going back and forth to the Blue Monday? I feel like
No,
that one's everywhere
like
right now.
yeah, I like that one a lot. And then I've just been really deep on the Beyonce TikToks.
Wow,
Like,
wow, that's perfect.
incredibly, like, I feel like every third video on my FYP right now is someone like doing a long deep dive on Cowboy Carter, and I'm here for it.
I also like the ones that you could do it. I'm thinking of like for big blanket, you could be like, how to become a 10-foot by 10-foot blanket. And then you swipe and it's like, why'd you swipe? Like, I think the why'd you swipe meme is pretty solid too.
I've also just really been enjoying like captured moment TikToks. Like I feel like I'm getting a lot of it lately where it's just like I saw one of the other day someone posted their dad trying an espresso martini for the first time and his
Oh, cool.
eyes just like brighten up. Like things like that that are like both very funny but also kind of nice. Love that.
I think that's what that reminds me of the huge success that we saw with Songfinch when with the sort of experiential ads of sort of playing the song that was created for someone and having all the emotion there. That really experiential approach works well as well. So I can see that relating well to that.
Totally. It's like the best piece of marketing advice you can give anyone. It's like if you're having a tough time, just throw a baby or a puppy or somebody crying in there and you're gonna increase engagement.
I think we just need to do another podcast where we just like scroll through our feeds and just talk about the various memes that we love. So we can save that for another topic, another time. But for
Some of
now,
mine
yeah.
are
We'll say
there.
again. Oh, I
And then
can't
some of
talk
mine
about a lot of them on there.
are just like that's between me and TikTok.
Me and the
They get that data.
CCP. That's between me and the CCP. Not. I don't want to start any more rumors about. Yeah, anything like TikTok. I think that the rumors of TikTok being kind of closed down have kind of died down a little bit right now. It seems like it's not. It's. I never felt like it was a big option. Like that was really going to happen.
It would be really insane to do in an election year from like the
Yeah.
point of view of someone who used to work politics. It's like a wildly bad PR move. But it is interesting. Like it does bring up a lot of interesting, I think, post-election like roots. Like I don't think there's a like I might be wrong, but I don't think it'll ever totally be gone. But it is very interesting to think about at this point. Like the U.S. kind of owns every big platform, so they in turn own all that, which they haven't been super responsible with. So it's kind of like we're giving other people a try now. But it is an interesting conversation that they have up until this point been the sole proprietors of these big platforms.
It is super interesting, and they own Hollywood as well, right? They own this other the whole cultural generation engine that has been this huge force in our lifetimes. And it's funny because TikTok is like eating Hollywood now. Almost everyone when they're watching a movie is also doing some kind of scrolling, I've met multiple people that are like, I can't really sit through a full movie anymore. Like I am much more onto this like short form thing. So it's like it's the clock is ticking. I think that's why it's
Totally.
called that.
I love to watch shows on TikTok, and it's not in order. I recently caught up on Game of Thrones by watching it on
Nice.
out of order. It was great.
My big move these days is watching shows. Like I'm obsessed with Shogun right now, and I'm like every time I watch a show, I'm chat GPTing it. I'm like okay, this historical period sounds crazy. I know this is fiction. Tell me about it. Blah blah blah. Like every time when I was trying to understand the three body problem, watching that like science fiction on Netflix, this crazy science fiction. I'm like, what happened in episode 3 and blah blah blah. Like chat GPT is my like go to companion for watching anything now. So.
That's perfect. Instead of talking to the person you're like watching something with, I feel like that's like a big complaint. People
Yeah.
talk a lot during movies or shows. You just whip out ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, I'm talking to it like it's Scarlett Johansson as well. I have that voice thing. I know,
Oh,
annoying everyone
yeah.
that's around me. We won't get into it now. You mentioned politics. It would be cool to queue up. I guess we've got many months until the U.S. election, but I feel like this is going to be the hairiest U.S. election of our lifetimes. And it'd be interesting. You've worked in politics. It'd be interesting to get your take on kind of the landscape, what happens. Like, I guess there will be a lot more political spending soon, which will kind of like could stand to raise CPMs, I imagine.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it's a crazy thing too because it happens in a big way in the U.S. every 4 years. So 4 years ago, Meta was totally different. So it's like one of those really interesting things where it's like, you can to a point predict like costs will go up, but yeah, I think there's a
Q4
lot of very
also.
yeah, Q4 plus an election plus yeah, I think there'll be hopefully some tighter regulations that we didn't have it like 4 years ago. So it'll make like the entire thing interesting. I'd be nervous if I worked at Meta.
Are you
It's
planning
like
any Eclipse content? That's the other thing that's dominating my feed right now is like, here's all this, like all the weird things going around this Eclipse, which I'm sure will end up being a nothing burger. But it's interesting to see how many people are latching on. Like everyone feels a little apocalyptic these days, I think. So when you have these events set out in the future, everyone's like looking to them to be like, oh, that'll be when something happens. But I'll be surprised.
totally my favorite. Before I go, I'm not doing any Eclipse content, but my favorite comment I've seen recently on TikTok about the Eclipse was someone I related this. It was like, I'm a part of Gen Z. Can it just happen? If something's gonna wipe us out in the next year, like I don't want to go to work every day from now until then. We can just expedite this process. That would be great. I definitely buy into that Gen Z, like, I don't know, cost of living stuff. Like, if we just get it over with fast, painless. I don't really care for all the conspiracy stuff. I just want to know yes or no.
I like it. Well, hopefully April 8th we'll have an answer. This will actually be out after that. So if you hear this podcast, probably means everything's fine. Otherwise, come find us. We'll be in the bunker sharpening sticks. But until then, Avery, thanks for coming on again. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks. This is great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilot House's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.